Hello, it's Carrie here, and I'm wanting to talk to you today about your proposal project. This work will take you through the end of the semester. Most of you, I think, are more comfortable working asynchronously, and so for the most part, we are going to meet asynchronously. However, you are more than welcome to meet in smaller groups with me via Zoom, and I can easily show you how to use Zoom, or you can meet one on one with me using Zoom. I think Susie can attest to the fact that it works really well. She attended an office hour, virtual office hour. But I probably will try to do one group session. Again, not required for you to attend, but more so that you can listen to the conversation about this assignment. It's one thing to get an assignment in writing, and it's another thing to hear me to talk about it. And then, yet again, another thing to be able to ask questions and explore possibilities. So I want to give you all three things. Before you listen to this little mini lecture, please print out a copy of the assignment and have it next to you so that you can see how I've written things and compare that with how I'm talking about them. That way, if there's any inconsistencies or any questions that arise, you can be prepared to identify them. So, the objectives of this project overall are to identify a problem, to argue that the current solutions aren't working, and to propose solutions to an aspect of the problem. Part one is worth 100 points. The whole assignment's worth 350. Part one is to identify the problem. So, first, for the entire project, I want you to consider your audience to be the board of a charitable organization. That's going to be all of us in this classroom. We have millions of dollars to give you to help you solve your problem. And we're your audience. So we're your peers, but we're not well informed about your particular project. We give money to all sorts of um, problems for that regard. And so you just need to explain to us your problem. The second thing that you need to be thinking about is logos and ethos. So you establish the problem by giving us research. You need to tell us the story of what is going on. So in the assignment, I give you a sentence. Consider that you can fill in the blanks on this possible sentence. This problem is concerning because of X and because of Y. And I've included details about something I know something about. So the problem of bladder cancer among women is concerning because women die disproportionately to men of the disease, and because a woman's diagnosis is delayed between 6 to 18 months in comparison to men with the same disease. And I would need to provide research that demonstrates that. Now, note that that's a large part of Logos, is establishing that problem, but it also establishes ethos for the audience who's listening. So it shows that I've done my homework, that I know what I'm talking about. I may need to include charts and graphs to display information in order to make a point. It just is up to you what the nature of the problem is. And then pathos and ethos. So, pathos, um, Aristotle tells us that the biggest part of an argument is logos. He wants that to be the most telling thing. But he does admit that catalyst for action comes from emotion, and that we don't act unless we have some sort of emotion to respond to. Now, he also tells us that we can't have too much emotion, or it tends to make us feel unable to act. It gives us inertia. So, if you consider fear, um, in the current situation that we're in with COVID-19, I think that we can engender too much fear, and it could just have people say, well, there's no way I can avoid this. I'll just go out and, confront the disease. But if we stimulate enough fear that people wash their hands thoroughly and social distance, then we provide a catalyst for what will happen. So in my situation, I would tell the story of my experiences with bladder cancer and how that happened for me as a woman. Again, that also establishes my ethos, as well as establishing the um, the emotion of the situation. People like a good story, and people trust a good story for that. So that is part two. You're establishing the nature of the problem, and you're talking about your own connection to the problem. Part two, the current response is insufficient. Now, the thing that I want you to consider is that it's very unlikely that you are going to have the solution that solves a problem that everyone else has failed to work on. So, in my situation, there's been a lot of research done on bladder cancer, tons of research, and there's been work done on women in bladder cancer. So, the description of what's currently being done, doctors and researchers tend to want to find biological solutions to problems. So, what we see with bladder cancer and this delayed diagnosis with women is that doctors want to see if the cancer that women have is actually biologically different from the cancer that men have. And it turns out that there's some evidence that it's true. I would tell you that there's a weakness to this approach, which is that it's not the only thing that's going on. We also know that women are having their diagnosis delayed from this disease, which I could get into a lot of detail on, and you don't need me to. But it happens in general practitioners' offices. That the signs and symptoms of the disease are attributed to other things with women, and that we are not addressing that particular concern effectively. Even though there is some work being done even towards that, it's not sufficient. So, parts three and four would be the proposal. And in my particular example, I'm asking folks to see the big picture. So, the big picture is that I think that there's a rhetorical problem. I think we're talking about this disease in ways that aren't helpful to women and to general practitioners in terms of understanding it. I think that these groups of people don't fully understand what's at stake. Whereas the symptoms that occur to signify the disease are taken very seriously in men, it's not taken as seriously in women for some biological reasons that go into it. So I would explain what's going on there. And then finally, you would want the details. And this is where the rubber hits the road. So, what I would say is that I would want to propose that I would gather some women together and that we would go to health events and we would tell our stories about diagnosis. And that in that process, we would educate women about how to attend to that diagnosis. And again, not events that have to do with cancer, but just general health events. There are all sorts of health fairs and so on. Now, the details here ask you to get very, very specific. So I would need to come up with the specific health events that women would attend, and how am I going to find the women to attend to those things. I also am suggesting that that same panel go and talk to some general practitioners. That's a harder thing to do, and I would really have to do some research about where general practitioners are involved for that. Okay, a couple of things. One thing I want to tell you is that one difference from the syllabus is the syllabus notes a multimodal presentation. I'm not asking you to do that. You didn't sign up for an online course, and so I think asking you to put online your multimodal presentation is it's just too big of an ask for this. I just don't think it's worth doing. Instead, what I'm going to ask you to do is have the final submission, which is worth 50 points, in which you put together all of the parts and submit it as a formal presentation. Um, and sorry, my phone just rang. And you could put it together as a final submission. And then that would be worth 50 points. So you have this formal package that looks good, and that's going to go to the board for everything. And then finally is the calendar. I have listed on the handout what's due, which weeks, but I want you to know that the pattern we're going to observe is that papers should be submitted for peer review by 11:59 p.m. on Wednesdays, peer review completed by 11:59 p.m. on Fridays, and papers revised and submitted to me by 11:59 on Sundays. Keep in mind that this will go towards the 150 points of participation. And so there are points that figure into that as well. I'm sure you're going to have a lot of questions, and I would be glad to answer those individually. I'd be glad to answer those through announcements, maybe through another lecture. And we will try a synchronous class meeting as well for those who can attend. Okay, I hope everyone is well and feeling good. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.